Hi again. In this moment, we're going to discuss about Chapter 12, Subculture and Customer Behavior. The learning objectives are the first one to understand what subculture is and its relationship to culture. The second one to understand nationality as a subcultural influence on the consumer behavior. The third one to understand religious affiliations such as subcultural influence on consumer behavior. And then the fourth one to understand geographic and regional residence as subculture influence on the consumer behavior. There are more learning objectives you can later see, and then perhaps not all of them will be explained here. You can see here this is an advertisement using a Latinus or Spain language. Then there's some question and what kind of person that being targeted by this advertisement. And then you can see here that in order to build a market by reaching Hispanic American customer, Hispanic American customer prefer to have an advertisement that use their own language instead of the US language. So this advertisement will be very fit for them. Before we go further, we have to discuss what is the definition of subculture. Subculture is a distinct cultural groups that exist as an unidentifiable segment within a larger, more complex society. We have learned about culture before, but we only learn about one culture. What if there are a lot of culture in this country or in this world, but they mix because some ratio and they are original from one country, they go to the other country and stay there for a long time, then we can call that as a subculture. Here is the picture of how the relationship between culture and subculture. We have seen that a subculture trait of Hispanic American. So someone who comes from Spain, for example, but they are actually staying American, so they have a Hispanic American. There's some subculture there. And then subculture traits of Asian American. They combine to become a dominant culture trait of US citizens. As we have learned before in the culture chapter, this is called as the national culture. Another example of major subcultural categories, as you can see on the table 12.1, the categories are based on nationality. There are examples of a Greek, Italian, Russian, based on religion, and then based on geographic region, race, age, gender, occupation, and also social class. They're considered as a category of the subculture. Nationality subculture of Hispanic, we're going to emphasize more on different subcultures, especially because our textbook talking about American book. Then we learned a little bit about the subculture in the US. The first one is about Hispanic. Hispanic known as a stronger preference customer for well-established brands. So they prefer to have a known brand and then a brand that has been set to have a good reputation and then a market leader, for example. They prefer to go at the smaller stores, even though there are some kind of shifting on culture that now they prefer to go to the supermarket and to have American style there on the supermarket. And most of the youth are more fashion conscious than non-Hispanic peers. This is also another example of advertisement that try to target Hispanic, that they target Spain customer in US. This is a national subculture. Then the population of Hispanic there in US. This is quite an old data, but we can try to see that most of them, the most Hispanic population in US and Mexico, and then Dominican Republic is 3%, Cuba is 4%, South America is 5%, Puerto Rico, and then Central America is 9%, while the other is represented by 4%. Now we're going to talk about religious subculture. There are more than 200 organized religious groups in the US. The primary organized faiths include Protestant denomination, Roman Catholicism, Islam, and Judaism. The customer behavior symbolically and ritualistically associated with the celebration of religious holiday. There are also possibility on the regional subculture where many regional differences exist on their consumption behavior. Just for example, Westerners have a mug of a black coffee, while those stay on the east part of US has a cup of coffee with milk and sugar. White bread is preferred by those who stay in the South and Midwest, while rye and whole wheat are preferred for those who stay in East and West Coast. Now we're going to talk about the major racial subculture of African American. The African American customer represents 30% of the US population, and then the purchasing power estimate 845 billion. This is an example advertisement that they try to target African American, and then their advertisement called as the black media because they also use African American people on the magazine or on the advertisement. This is a characteristic of how African American subculture as a customer in US. They prefer leading brand or over a private label brand, so they prefer to have a quite high class brand. They're quite brand loyal customer. They have a higher than average trips to grocery stores and higher spending. They spend more than other segments on telephone service and also hair service. This is a characteristic for Asian American racial subculture. They are fastest growing racial segments, and then the first group including 6 major ethnicities like Chinese, Filipino, Indian, Vietnamese, Korean, and Japanese. 90% of them live in a metropolitan area and business ownership is high. This is an example of region of residence for selected subculture groups. Most of them are staying in West for Asian and Pacific Islander, and then why the other, there more or less people stay there from Asian. And different than the Hispanic and African customer in America, the Asian American, they prefer to have advertisement in English as a language, and it is also self-reported as well as spoken. So they prefer to have the advertisement in American language, and they also prefer to talk in American language. We can also note subculture according to age will be divided into different generations like Generation X and Y, baby boomers, and also seniors. Generation Y is those who born in 1977 to 1994 or 1982 to 2000. Different sources will show different age range. This group will be divided into 3. Generation Y adult, which on the age of 19 to 28 years old, Generation Y teen, 13 to 18 years old, while Generation Y twins is 8 to 12 years old. There is also called as Twixter that on the age of 21 to 29 and live with their parents. For the Generation X born between 1965 to 1979, also referred to as Xers, busters, and slackers, do not like a label brand, they are quite cynical and do not want to be marketed to. The next one is the baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964. They represent 40% of the adult population. They are motivated customer, not anxious to retire and handle it as opportunity for a new start, a continuation of pre-retirement life, unwelcome disruption and transition to an old age. Older customer, roughly 65 years old and older, growing segment due to better medical care, declining birth rate, and the aging of the larger baby boomer segment. There are 3 segments by age. The first one, the young old, with the age of 65 to 74 years old. The old, which is on the age of 75 to 84 years old. And the old, which is on the 85 years old or older. Older customer Segmentation can be also done on motivation and the quality of life orientation. So we have to make sure if you're targeting the older customer, you can provide a medical or a healthy product for a good quality of life. According to gender as a subculture, we're going to focus on working women, which is divided into several segments of all women. The first one is stay at home. This is a woman who focuses on their family and taking care of their family without job and not working. The second one is plan to work. This is a woman who was working before, but they are stopped to work because they are pregnant, and after that they give birth to the baby and stay with the baby until the baby is ready, and they plan to work again. And then the third one is a job working, just a job working, means that this woman is working, but they see job as something to get money and pay attention more on the family. Career-oriented working is a woman that pay attention on their career more focusedly and then see family as a part of their life. We have to understand when you learn about culture, it's not about one culture or two culture. A marketer should understand and should strive to understand how multiple subcultural membership jointly influence customer behavior. So there is no one person came from one culture, especially if that person came from this place and then moved to the other place. They perhaps going abroad and then stay there for several while, move to another office. So it means that different place will be influence them with a different culture. So understanding that more will be very important for a marketer to have a success to understand on their customers' behavior. Thank you for listening, and I will be open for questions.